So I was actually just telling Carissa that, I always joke that all of my destinations are my favorite destinations, but I had to really whittle this one down because I went a bit overboard on it because I really feel like the Baltics are just this kind of underappreciated, undervalued destination in Europe. It's kind of one of the last areas that people will explore in Europe. So I really just kind of want to talk about why I think it's so wonderful and kind of how to best sell it and just kind of the highlights of it. So we're going to get into it. I really do have a lot to chat about, so I hope you all can stay for it, but I'll try not to be too crazy. I always think it's great to start with a map to just kind of see where it is because this isn't a destination that a lot of people are booking often. I know that you might not have it in your mind always exactly where it is geographically. So the three Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are kind of up here in the corner, so bordering Russia on one side, and then you have Belarus and Poland. And you also have this little like extra kick out kind of area over here that is also a part of Russia. So it's on the Baltic Sea. They're popular ports as well for Baltic Sea cruises. And that's just kind of to give you an idea of geographically where it is. And that kind of gives you an idea too about culturally where it is as well. So the three states are commonly referred to as a collection of the Baltic states. It's a little misleading, but everybody does it. It's how we kind of label it ourselves. They all three have very different cultural identities, different languages, slightly different religions. So for example, Estonia, which is the northernmost of the three states, has more in common with its Nordic neighbors like Finland than it does really with the other two, both linguistically, culturally, and historically. And then for those who might have kind of done on these before, Chris and I are big history nuts. So these countries have really interesting histories. They've all three were part of the Soviet Union. They were all three a part of the Russian Empire at different times. Poland owned parts of specifically Lithuania, but also small parts of Latvia at certain times. So they've really kind of held these unique historical perspectives. They're actually kind of were the kickoff point too for the downfall, if you will, of the Soviet Union with the so-called Singing Revolution back in 1989. So they all three gained their independence from the Soviet Union in 1991, and they've kind of made big strides to separate themselves from Russia and to really kind of join in as a part of Europe. So they all are three they're all members of the EU, so they are on the Euro, and they are all three in the Schengen area. So as far as transport between the countries works, it's very easy. And Americans don't need passports to go to Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania. So I kind of want, pardon?
Visas, they do need a passport to
go.
go.
Sorry, yes, I'm sorry. They do need passports. They don't need visas.
Right.
Sorry. So I kind of want to go over the three main ways quickly that we kind of offer this region. So we have kind of our traditional full service trip, which we kind of encapsulate as like an essential Baltics itinerary. So if you've ever worked with us before, we have kind of these essential itineraries built for all of our destinations, just kind of as an idea of what the highlights are and kind of a place to get the ball rolling, but they can all be customized. But we do offer full service ground touring. So, cars and drivers, guided tours, hotel booking, help transporting between the different places. So our Essential Baltics program really kind of gets you into all the major areas. So it goes through Tallinn, Muhu Island, Riga, Klaipėda, and then Vilnius. So in general, I will say that most people are going to move from Tallinn to Riga down to Vilnius, or vice versa, just because logistically it's what makes sense. And as far as like add-ons or caps, Some people will add Russia on to the program, but I'd say the most popular is actually going to be Helsinki, just due to flights. You can get to Helsinki via Finnair pretty easily. And you can get from Helsinki to Tallinn on a fast ferry that's offered multiple times a day, and only takes a couple hours. So it's a really popular way of kind of like an add-on, and works well for American flights. So I just wanted to kind of go back to the map just for a second to kind of show what I was talking about. So people typically will start up here in Tallinn. And then if they're going to go to Muhu Island, which I'll talk about, they'll come over here. But otherwise, they'll come down to Riga and then down to Vilnius, or vice versa. You just kind of always want Riga in the middle, just because as you can see, it works logistically. And they're not very far distances, so it doesn't make any sense to fly between them. And there's unfortunately not very good rail transport, so you are typically moving between cities via car here. And talking about cars, this is a destination that works really well for white glove self-drive. So if you do have clients who are a little more adventurous or a little more independent, this is a really popular area to do self-drive. And again, that's just because you're going to be moving between the destinations via car anyway. So if you are okay with driving yourself, this works really well. If you've not done our white gloves self-drive before, just kind of the highlights of what it is. So it works just kind of like a regular FIT itinerary, just with your clients doing the driving between the destinations. So we still book the tours where any touring is needed. And then we also book the hotels. So really, and we also do a pre-programmed GPS, so that's with them when they arrive in the country. And so from day one, it's just kind of, they click on the destination and the GPS gets them there. And then, so that still includes all of the normal services we'd offer, like theater tickets if they wanted, dinner reservations. So all of that, it's just a little more independence on, you know, getting from point A to point B on those days. And then lastly, like I said, it is a popular area for Baltic Sea cruises. So the three ports that people typically are stopping in here are going to be Tallinn, Riga, and Klaipėda. And so you can find samples if you want short tour samples on our website. And of course, you know, unfortunately, short tours are a little shorter, so you can typically only do the highlights of the cities. But the benefit here to private short tours is that you don't always have so much time, so it really helps you make the most of that time to do it privately versus as a part of the ship's group tours. So now we'll kind of move on to talking about the destinations more specifically, and starting with Estonia. It's probably the most well-known of the Baltic states because Tallinn is also going to be the most common of the port stops for cruises. So it's logistically an easy one to fly into. Typically, you can get pretty good connections through like Poland and even France and Amsterdam. So it works out pretty well. It's a lovely city with really great history. Kind of one of the remarkable things about the city is, as opposed to a lot of the other large cities in this area, the historic medieval, like the outer walls and a lot of the medieval center have sustained through history. So they lasted through World War I and World War II, which can't really be said the same for all of like Vilnius or Riga even. So it's kind of got this unique aspect of being preserved. So some of the walls date back to the 1500s. It's really, really lovely. So as far as big sites to see here, so you're going to want to see Trumpia Castle. So that's kind of that outer wall that you had saw. So that's going to be one of the big things. It's got a beautiful vantage point of viewing the city from. And you also Alexander Nevsky Cathedral, which is up here in the top left. It's kind of this gorgeous cathedral with these bells up top that you can hear ringing from afar. Another great stop is the Great Guildhall. It has just this great history, and it also it has the Spirit of Survival exhibition a lot of times, which is a really great insight into Estonian history. And the building itself dates back to the 15th century, so it's definitely one of the older buildings there. And then I really like to include either a visit to Cadriarc Park and the Kumu Museum, which is kind of the more modern museum for the area, and it's really, really well done. But it does house collections from Estonian artists from the 18th century through to World War II. But it's a really, really wonderful collection. And they also have a permanent exhibition that's post World War II to contemporary. So you really are getting a good idea of what art history has looked like here through more recent history. And then if you have families, there is a really lovely seaplane museum, Seaplane Harbor Museum, and that focuses on kind of maritime history, but it's fairly interactive. So if you have families, that's a really, really lovely museum. As far as hotels for the city, we have two that we really love. There's the Telegraph Hotel. It's located in a former post office, hence the name, from the 19th century. It's a small boutique hotel, and it does have a historic part of the hotel as well as some kind of modern wings. So there are two different, the rooms are kind of split stylistically into like a historic and a little bit more modern. But it has like these, it has really this lovely spa that you can see down here on the bottom. I just think it's a really, really lovely area. So it's a little smaller, but it is a smaller hotel, but it's a really lovely, centrally located hotel. And then the other one is the Schlossley Hotel. We're really big fans of this one. It's a boutique hotel, just 23 rooms. The rooms are on the smaller side, I will say, because it is in a historic like building. So we recommend kind of the junior suites and up here. But I just think this hotel is wonderful because it exudes history, and you can see in this top big picture, in the colder months, they have this old fireplace that really adds warmth and ambience. And I think it's a really lovely hotel. Again, very centrally located in the historic city center. So walking distance to the restaurants and a lot of the sites.
One quick question that we've had come in, Jody. For the hotels that we and you arrange on our White Glove self-drive programs, are these selected to be easily accessible by vehicle, or are they the two that we recommend that you just mentioned that may also be accessible easily by vehicle? Basically, how do you select hotels on the self-drive programs?
Yeah. So, I mean, the hotels that we prefer are typically still the hotels that we prefer, but we might have one that we prefer more than another as far as self-drive goes. I will say for Tallinn, both of these, because it does still retain its medieval walls, and so it has all those cobblestones. So parking in the city center is a little bit more difficult. So neither of these hotels has really easy dedicated parking. They both do offer valet service. So with Tallinn, when you self-drive, we actually typically have people drop their cars off when they arrive, because most of the touring can be done easily on foot for viewing like inside of Tallinn. So you don't need a car for that touring. And because it's normally either the first or the last city, you either pick it up before you leave to drive out of Tallinn, or you drop it off once you arrive in, and then just do an airport transfer at the end. So that's typically how we have to do it if clients do want to hold on to the car. There are parking lots that are a short walk or taxi drive away from the hotels that you could also park at, that are a little more economical than using the valet of the hotel. And then beyond Tallinn, I like to talk about that there are a couple of great day trips that you can do from Tallinn, as well as an overnight trip that we recommend. One day trip is to Vilhelmina National Park. It's Estonia's largest and oldest national park. About 50% of Estonia is actually covered in forested land. So this particular national park is also home to like really lovely bird and mammal species. And you can spend about half a day going out there and walking, swimming. There is an area of it that is wheelchair accessible. So they basically have kind of a boardwalk that goes out into a part of the national park. So even if you have someone who's not a great walker, that is still semi-accessible. And this picture of me is from this past winter. And you can actually go snowshoeing through the bog. So it's actually partially a bog. And you can go snowshoeing through it or bog walking in the summer months. So it's this really beautiful year-round thing. And at the end of your walk, you kind of sit down for snacks. And if it's colder months, they'll heat up a nice kind of mulled cider over the campfire. Another one is Rocca al Mar, or the Cliff by the Sea. And so it's an Estonian open air museum, and it's really beautiful because it displays different types of architecture and buildings throughout the history of the country. So it's about a half-day experience. If you have people who are really into bicycling, they can actually bicycle out to it if they are more fit. It has lovely bicycle lanes that go out there. And then as far as overnight trips from Tallinn, one of our favorites is Pedaste Manor, which is on Muhu Island. This is really great for guests who are on a full FIT or on our White Club self-drive, because it is a little farther out. And what makes this area so interesting is during Soviet times, these islands, it's a part of like a 3-island chain, were actually cut off from the mainland by the Soviets because they were seen as a defense issue, because they were so close to Sweden and Finland, and so they were cut off. So this really retains, and that happened pretty early in the Soviet era, so the area retains a lot of its historical charm. There's not a lot of building on the islands, and you still have like very traditional like fisherman, farmer kind of things going on here. So it's a very traditional island. There's also some former Soviet military bases that you can go visit. So it's really interesting. But one of our favorite parts of Muhu Island is actually this Pedaste Manor. It's this lovely property. It was the first 5-star property in the Baltic states. They have a fantastic in-house chef who does a chef's table every night. They also have an a la carte restaurant. They have a lovely spa. So this is like a really great option for someone who wants to take just maybe a day or two and kind of have a relaxed downturn part of the trip. So it's really, really lovely, from the food to the ambiance to the area. You can do some lovely little walks around there. So not somewhere where you want to spend like 3 or 4 days, but 1 or 2 nights, it's a really lovely experience. So this is highly recommended for anyone who has the time to add it to their program. And then from Estonia, we're going to move on to Latvia. So most people who are coming here, again, because it's in the middle, you're either going to be coming in from Lithuania or coming down from Estonia. It's about a 4-hour drive from Tallinn to Riga. It's a little longer if you go to Muhu, just because of the ferry schedule. And we typically recommend breaking that drive up with a stop off in this little charming coastal town of Parnu. And Riga is really going to be the main draw for Latvia. It's got this fabulous old town. It's really great restaurants. As far as culinary goes, Riga is kind of going to be the standout star for the Baltic states. It's the most cosmopolitan of the 3 capitals. May through August is going to be your typical high season for Latvia, as well as the other 2 countries. And then June to August being the heaviest for cruises as well. It does cool off generally in the region around September, and winters can be cold. As you saw from that picture, it does get snowy, but it still is a year-round destination. I personally wouldn't have clients, for example, self-drive in the heavier winter months, especially if they're not from a place that has snow on the roads, but the rest of the year, it is still quite easy to self-drive. And then Riga, again, is the capital, and I like to say that it's one of the most beautiful cities that few people have ever heard of. It has this, like Tallinn, it has phenomenal history, it has really gorgeous architecture. Like I mentioned, it's really kind of the culinary gem of this area. If you're coming on a cruise ship, you typically do have enough time to kind of hit up the highlights of the city. If you're staying longer, you can really delve in and get to some of my other favorite areas. The highlights here are going to include things like St. Peter's Church, which was destroyed during World War II, but it has been rebuilt really beautifully by the city. And I always recommend going up to the top of the spire for beautiful pictures, like panoramic views over the city. From here, we're typically going to suggest you explore the Art Nouveau district. Believe it or not, Riga has over 800 Art Nouveau buildings. It's the largest number of any city in Europe. So if you have architecture fans, this is actually a really phenomenal city to visit. Uh, and this picture up here is just an example of like the really beautiful Art Nouveau stylings that you can get here. Riga also has a really lovely central market. It's housed in these old Zeppelin hangars that you can see here on the bottom. And they've been converted into market stalls, which makes it really quite unique. And we can do a mini food tour through the market, in addition to other food tours through the cities. But or you can just go as a part of a regular tour and visit and kind of buy a couple snacks or have a taste. So as you can see, the city really does have it all. For hotels, again, we have two favorites. We have the Grand Palace Hotel. It truly feels like a grand mansion. The rooms are on the smaller side again, but they are well appointed. I think that the location here is really unique because it's on this kind of tiny, quiet street, but that tiny, quiet street is connected to one of the main city squares, historic city squares. So you're really located, but it kind of feels like you're off the beaten path a bit. And the other one is going to be the Grand Hotel Kempinski. It's one of the newer luxury hotels in Riga. The rooms are very spacious. So if you have someone who really wants a larger room, this is going to be the choice for them. It's got a great location. It's just across from the Opera House. So some rooms do have views over the Opera House. And even if you don't have plans to stay here, the rooftop restaurant and bar are really fabulous. And we would definitely recommend, even if they just want to go up there for a cocktail, for the views over the city. I don't have a picture of it, but the Hotel Bergs is also popular here. It's a luxury boutique property with just 37 rooms. It's very central. It's not, I wouldn't say it's our favorite, but it is a good option. It's a little bit strange the way some of the rooms are laid out. So that's the only reason that it's not a favorite. When the Grand Hotel Kempinski was built, it kind of took its place as our favorite. And then outside Riga, there are a number of great day trips. If you have a little bit more time. So this picture is a Sigulda castle. So there's Sigulda National Park, and it's this great parkland, and there are just a myriad of former castle towns there that you can visit. Some are basically just a museum now, and then there are some that are kind of like living museums. People are still living and still very active. So it's very cool, very picturesque, a little bit Disney-ish at times. If you have someone who's really into nature or photography, the Great Canary Bog Boardwalk is a great choice. It's really lovely. You can also make a stop into Drumala, which is kind of a very typical Baltic beach town. Not somewhere where I would recommend you stay overnight, but it is like a fun walk through, the grand boardwalks along the beach. And then one that most people actually will do, they'll do this one on their way to either Klaipėda or to Vilnius, is Rundell Palace. It's just this really lovely preserved Baroque palace, and it has these gorgeous gardens that you can kind of see on the picture on the right-hand side. So that's a lovely stop, and if, depending on how the timing works, I don't see this about everywhere, but they have, where the traditional kitchens would have been in the palace, they have like a little cafe that serves really, really good lunch, actually. So perfect spot for a lunch on your way. And another popular spot is that people kind of want to take a peek at is the Hill of Crosses. So that can again be done when you're going between Latvia and Lithuania. And the Hill of Crosses is just about, a 30-minute stop. And it's one that we get asked about a lot. So then moving on to Lithuania, we'll start with the capital, which is Vilnius. So just overall, like its neighbors, again, it has really intertwined history with its neighbors, but also with Poland. In the 14th century, it was the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. It was actually one of the largest countries in Europe. And it included parts of like Belarus and the Ukraine and small pieces of Russia and Poland. And after that, Lithuania and Poland kind of were married up for a while before eventually Lithuania was annexed by the Russian Empire and kind of stayed a hotbed through World War II and then and then was back under Soviet control during the Soviet Union after World War II. So Vilnius is the capital. It is one of the best preserved old towns in Europe. It is a UNESCO site filled with Gothic, Renaissance, and Baroque masterpieces. I will say that Estonia and Latvia are a little, I'd say, better off sometimes than Vilnius. Vilnius is a bit maybe of the poorer sister of the two. And that's apparent sometimes just in the level of preservation and conservation that's been done in the city center. So it is getting better there, but you can definitely see that it's a little bit of the poorer neighbor. Of the many churches here, there's a gorgeous cathedral that's, literally nothing short of spectacular. And behind the cathedral, there's a royal palace. It's been under reconstruction since 2012. And it was just really badly damaged in the 15th century and then dismantled by the Russians in the 18th. So they definitely had their work cut out for them as far as, preserving and rebuilding what they have still. Another important site is going to be the Vilnius University. It was founded in 1570 by Jesuits. It's one of the most important centers of the Counter-Reformation, and it's home to one of the best known libraries in all of Europe. It's just gorgeous, you can see it's just gorgeous. And also in the Old Town, there's a museum to the genocide victims, which was opened in about 1992, and it's in the former KGB headquarters. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as the KGB Museum. So its name has kind of been an issue, bit of tension there. So it is officially called the Museum of Genocide Victims. And then one of the things that I think is really fun to do that you might not think of is hot air ballooning here. So Vilnius, as well as Riga, are really popular for hot air ballooning. I think it's really lovely, though, to do in Vilnius because you kind of get a really good mix of this forested area and also the Old Town. You can do it kind of near the city, or you can do it closer to Trakai. And I'll have a slide on what Trakai is here in a minute. As far as hotels, again, we kind of kept it to two favorites. There is the Kempinski here, the Grand Kempinski here. This has kind of been our long-standing favorite. It's a lovely 5-star property. It's only 96 rooms, but the location is really, it couldn't be better because it is right on Cathedral Square. You can kind of see in this bottom left-hand picture here. So that's the breakfast room with views right onto the cathedral. So it really is a lovely location. And a newer hotel that we've kind of fallen in love with is Hotel Pasai. And the thing is, this is going to be a design hotel. It's part of the design hotel group. So it can have some slightly funky aspects to it. But if you have someone who's into architecture or design, this is a lovely choice. It opened just in 2018, so it is still fairly new. It's located in the Old Town, and it has a restaurant called 14 Horses that's located in the former stables. So it is a really lovely hotel. It has kind of a completely different feel than the more traditional Kempinski does. And then getting out beyond Vilnius, this is a picture of Trakai Castle. And we definitely recommend a visit to it. It's only about 20 miles away, so not too far, easily done as a day trip. It was the ancient capital of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, and it really couldn't be more picturesque. It's basically a castle on a small island surrounded by water. What could be more fairy tale-esque than that? And it has this really interesting history. And it also is still home today to a small community of Karaites. So if you have people with Jewish heritage interests, that makes it an even more interesting site there. And so this is kind of a beautiful day trip. There's also Kaunas. We do this as a day trip. It takes the better part of a day because it is a little farther out. Unfortunately, the hotel scene here is not really great. It's kind of a 3-star plus at the best. So we don't really recommend staying in the city for most of our guests, but instead doing it as a full day trip. So the kind of things that make it unique here, there's this really lovely old town that you can walk through, but also you have here the Ninth Fort Museum, which is a memorial and museum in honor of a mass murder committed here during World War II. And then the larger photo is of the Pasalis Monastery, and it's this really wonderful Baroque architecture and frescoes. So there's definitely a lot of sites here. There's a few more that are related to World War II. There's also, again, if you have Jewish heritage interest, there's a lot of Jewish heritage interest here because they did have a ghetto during World War II, and there was a thriving Jewish community here prior to World War II, and even more thriving prior to the pogroms. So it's a great day site, lots of interest from people to go here for a day. The other one is going to be Klaipeda, which is kind of a unique one in that most people aren't super interested in going to Klaipeda itself. They're actually going here to go to the Curonian Spit, which is this kind of thin piece of land just along the coast of Lithuania. And it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Half of the spit belongs to Lithuania and half of it still belongs to Russia. And if you do have clients who want to go to that piece that belongs to Russia, it is absolutely possible, but you do need a full Russian visa to do that. And one of the things that makes it popular is this was kind of a thriving artist colony during the 19th century and into the 20th century. So a lot of like Thomas Mann, his home is here and they've been turned into museums. So it's kind of this unique artistic enclave was here. And then you have these beautiful, massive sand dunes overlooking the water. So it's this really unique area. And then the town itself does have some history and some cute museums to go to. So typically people stay here for 2 nights. They arrive, go to sleep, then the next day do the full day tour, including the Curonian Spit, go to sleep, and then the next day make their way up to the next destination. So it's typically a 2-night stay for here. And again, if you are self-driving, the hotel does have dedicated parking right in front of it. So this is a great choice. And I guess I should have mentioned this. The other hotels, so in Riga, the Grand Palace Hotel gives you a parking pass that allows you to park street side. So we actually really love that one for self-drive if you're kind of not going during the high season. If you are going during the high season, you could still do it, but parking might be a little harder to find. But the Kempinski in Riga does have on-site parking that you can valet for. Same thing in Vilnius. You have the Kempinski. There is a public parking lot nearby that you can park at, or you can use their valet service. Same thing for the Pasai Hotel. You can either do public parking and just pay the public parking fees at a parking lot nearby, or use the hotel's valet service. So if you are staying in Klaipeda, like I mentioned, we do have a hotel here that we love. It's the Michelson Boutique Hotel. It's a smaller hotel. It's in a former warehouse, so you can kind of see the wood beams in this picture that they've retained a lot of the historical aspects of the hotel. It's really lovely. It's the best hotel in the area. It's kind of run by a small staff that are really dedicated to the quality of the service here. So it is really a nice hotel, and it's still walking distance to restaurants for going out to dinner and whatnot. I do like to mention that there are some special interests that can definitely be met with this area that you might not think of. So I think that at least one food tour here is well worth it. There's a wealth of really unique and traditional dishes here that you can explore on a food tour. As well, there are some really amazing chefs that are working here to kind of create modern twists with that farm to table experience. So everything from chocolate making classes, which I always think is fabulous because you get a great souvenir to take home, to really cool cooking classes that we can do. So this picture in the middle is from Three Parvu, which is 3 chefs, and it's this kind of really modern take on traditional cuisine, where they kind of paint with their sauces, if you will, on the table. So that's a really fun, hands-on interactive cooking experience. So that's one thing that I think that we can really offer that people might not necessarily think of when they think of the Baltics, is there is really good food to be had here. Um, and again, like I've mentioned a couple times, Jewish heritage travel. So they have this really outstanding Jewish history. Large Jewish communities have played a key role in the development of the region from about the 16th century onward. So the Jewish populations here were really decimated both by the pogroms and then by World War II. But the Jewish communities are kind of coming back and thriving once again. So, if you have clients with Jewish interest or connection in the area, please let us know. We have incorporated visits to, if you don't know, a lot of the American Jewish community actually immigrated to America during the pogroms, and a large portion of them came from Latvia and Lithuania. So a lot of the American Jewish community actually has strong connections with this area. So if you do, we've incorporated visits to towns that people's families originated from, and there are some really good sites. So the Bikerniki Forest and Salaspils outside of Riga, both sites where there were either a large number of Jews were murdered or there was a concentration camp. In Tallinn, there's the main synagogue, which is rebuilt, and the Jewish gymnasium. And Vilnius is really kind of, Lithuania is kind of the heart for the Jewish community in the area, and Vilnius has a large number of sites. So the Vilna Gaon Jewish State Museum is well worth a visit, I think, Jewish or not. And the Pailimo Synagogue is also wonderful, and they do still hold services there, and you can get invited to go for a service. As well, this is where a lot of the documents for people who immigrated during the pogroms are kept. So there is a large database. Lithuania is very good at holding on to records. And one other one that I know not many people think of, because I certainly didn't, but festive travel. They probably don't jump out to you for festive travel, but they really are a great choice. They don't bring in the large international crowds that, say, like the German or Austrian Christmas markets are going to bring in. So they do have a little bit more of a local charm and authenticity to them. And they also typically aren't quite as crowded as you would find in other parts of Europe. And I just think, I grew up in Florida, so this might not be fun for everybody, but these areas are also, especially Estonia, are more likely to have like a sprinkling of snow during the Christmas festive period, whereas places like Austria and Germany, again, get their main snowfall starting in January. So if you are looking for a bit of that, Christmas dusting, these are really great options. And then I think another great thing is because they have such a history that's been influenced by so many different denominations. So you have a mix of Catholicism and Lutheranism and Orthodox Christianity. So the markets actually tend to be open a little longer here. So they will typically open mid-November and stay open until early January. So they're not following a hard calendar timeline like a lot of other countries are. I was actually in Estonia last year during Christmas time and got to go to their Christmas market, and it was really, really a wonderful experience. And as far as who you can talk to here at Exeter for this region, there's myself and the regional manager, Lee Landis. So if you ever have any questions or anyone interested, we are more than happy to help you, and you can reach out to us. I always like to take a second and just mention our next webinar, which will be next week, same time, but it will be Bulgaria with Sylvia. And then lastly, I want to just thank you all for attending. I have my information up here on the screen. And I also always like to say, if you have a question or inquiry, but you don't know who to talk to about it, please feel free to just reach out to our general email, which is up here on the screen, info@exeterinternational.com. And we'll happily put you in contact with whoever the best person is to assist you with that trip or question.